6 o'clock or 5:30, I should say. Meeting yours. We can start with the. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to mention that the purpose of our meeting tonight is for the board to conduct board business. Meeting is open to the public and it is recorded. You can listen to all past board meetings by visiting board.student website. And this meeting is also being presented via Zoom. It's not appropriate for your audience members to interrupt board business. Let me turn on, man. Yeah, let's try that. And it's not appropriate for audience members to interrupt board business or ask questions during the meeting. Agenda items will be listed on the agenda, and in case of emergency, please exit the room using the exit closest to you. And I'd like to see Director Jeffries, would you share our vision and mission statement with us, please?
Our vision, our community inspires and prepares each student to thrive. And our mission, in connection with our community, the Sequim School District empowers staff to inspire hope and provide flexible, innovative learning opportunities in a safe and respectful environment so each student thrives.
Thank you. Director Homerson, would you care to share our land acknowledgement?
Sure. We acknowledge the land that we stand on. The Sequim School District administrative and school buildings sit on the ancestral land of the S'Klallam people. While the S'Klallam traditionally come from one nation, history has led to the formation of 3 sovereign S'Klallam tribal governments. Lower Elwha S'Klallam tribe located in Port Angeles, Jamestown S'Klallam tribe located in Sequim, Port Gamble S'Klallam tribe located in Kingston, Washington. The district's primary relationship is with the Jamestown S'Klallam tribe. Today, the tribe and district share a partnership that includes official consultation on program and funding changes that may directly affect American Indian and Alaska Native students, as well as holistic service planning for students to remain successful in their educational journeys.
Thank you. And with that, that's going to bring us to the approval of our minutes, both September 16th and October 1st. As well as the approval of our agenda and approval of our consent agenda. Is there any objection to the approval of the minutes, agenda, and consent agenda? Hearing none, we'll consider those approved.
I did want to interject something about the donation made by the Realtors Association. I think it's tremendous that they have invested so much money towards helping all kids participate in our sports programs.
Absolutely, for sure. Thank you for mentioning that. Okay, and with that, that's going to bring us to the public comment portion of the meeting. And if you are attending via Zoom and would like to make public comment, you'll just do so using the raise hand feature of the public or of the Zoom, which is located in the lower portion of your Zoom screen. And then we also have the sign up for public comment. Okay. And Zoom, no. Okay. With that, we'll go ahead and close the public comment. We don't have anyone signed up for public comment. And we do not have our student board representatives.
They both have athletic events tonight.
Okay. All right. Understandable. So that's going to bring us to our board reports. And our first one, DA Davidson, regarding our EP&O levy update. Welcome.
So I'd like to welcome Corey Plager and let you all know that we are going to be needing to renew our educational programming levy. It will conclude on December 31st, 2025.
And as we move forward to consider ballot items, we will be considering February of 2025 and our EP&O levy being brought forth to the voters. Corey is here tonight because he is going to give you the lay of the land about our current taxation regarding our EP&O levy, and would like to have you understand what possibilities could be moving forward. I will then be bringing you a secondary level of information about how our EP&O levy is currently being used at a subsequent meeting. So this is your first layer of information as we move toward that decision.
Thank you.
Thank you. I assume that the microphones are hot. Everything sound good? Perfect. Thank you for the introduction, Superintendent Nichols. I appreciate the invitation to share information tonight. I know I've met a couple of you either at WASDA or at the Capitol Facilities meetings, but my name is Corey Plager. I work at DA Davidson, a firm founded in Great Falls, Montana, in case you're wondering why there's bison on all of our slides. I've been there the last 7 years, but prior to that, I worked at Educational Service District 101 as the Director of Finance for 15 years. And so I had a lot of experience working with education levies. Our core service is to support schools with bonds. But when we have a chance in between bond measures that may be 5, 10, 15 years apart, we love to support school districts with complementary services on the basics of taxation, EP&O levies, capital levies. So the goal tonight is to set a baseline, as Superintendent Nichols mentioned, to just get some data, some trends and some facts in front of you to help you process as you look at putting a measure on the ballot in the next month or so. So please ask questions as we go, but Tracy, on slide 2, we have a high-level overview here, and we're going to start with the educational program and operations levies. This is flexible revenue from local taxpayers that stays at your county treasurer level in your account to supplement basic education, to do athletics, reduce class size, extra offerings, maybe arts, drama, music, you name it. This used to be considered to be above and beyond and enrichment, as we may say. But however, you're still using a lot of this to take care of basic education, whether it's school nurses, substitute teachers, curriculum, even electricity. So it isn't all flexible, but we do note that this is the most flexible of resources, but some of it is just still earmarked for basic education. You cannot ask for whatever you would like. You are subject to levy lid laws, and those are per pupil right now. So we have a set amount per pupil that I'll talk about in a future slide. You can collect up to 4 years, but it could be as short as 1 year, and there's schools all across the board on what they decide. And you must get simple majority, 50% plus 1 for approval with no validation. Your EP&O is currently scheduled through calendar year 25, so the voters approved that already. So why are we talking in 24? It's customary that you renew your levy in its final year to avoid a drop-off where you don't have resources for a year. So your goal is to renew this should the board want to proceed in this final year. Capital projects levies, the most common uses: technology, safety, security, HVAC, repair roofs, cafeterias, you name it. They can be up to 6 years or also simple majority. And your existing capital levy is also approved by voters through 2025. Now, bonds are for buildings. There's been a lot of conversations with the Capital Facilities Advisory Group, and those can be up to 40 years, but 20 is the most common. 20 is kind of the standard 30-year mortgage per se for schools, but those need supermajority 60%. However, schools can borrow at tax-exempt interest rates. So you may hear folks say, is now the right time? Interest rates are rocket high for mortgages and for car loans, but municipals get to borrow at tax-exempt interest rates. So we're under 4% right now for most schools with a rating similar to Sequim School District. Your last bond was approved in 1996 for $25 million. In 96, $25 million went a lot further than it goes today. And your debt capacity, which is, it sounds maybe a little bit absurd, is $437 million. That's your legal capacity, maybe not your logical capacity based on what the taxpayers would prefer on their tax statements. What I'd like to do before we look forward is look back and see how have voters responded to previous measures. In green are your prior EP&O levies that you've asked for since about 20, 25 years ago. And what you'll notice in green is overwhelming support. There's no red on any of your education program and operations replacement levies. You've also recently in tan had 2 capital levies that are also really well supported. You'll notice the only red in there is from school bonds. and those can be challenging at the 60% supermajority. I will point out, however, that you receive 59.5%, 57%. I have a joke that's in my belt here that says the last time a president got 60% was Richard Nixon. So it's so hard for schools to get 60% when we're talking about taxes, but it's hard for anybody to get 60%. So it's a big challenge to make sure that the whole community is on page with certain projects on the docket. However, this shows a really high level of community support for the last 20 plus years. It's overwhelmingly supportive. On the next slide, we dig just a little bit deeper, and this will be a great tool to be able to review in the future should you have questions. I also have the sources in almost every one of these slides if there's data involved. And this, I say, defined as enrichment because that's what's in law. So there's not a lot of references to educational program levies. They say enrichment levies. So there's still kind of a disagreement in law and how we're actually using levies for more basic education. We wish these were all enrichment dollars, but we still need these to support special education, transportation, food service, you name it. We used to call these M&Os. I've been in schools now for 20 plus years. Anybody else remember when we called them M&Os? The reason we stopped calling them M&Os is because people passed capital levies. To have a capital levy and a maintenance levy sounded like the same exact thing. So that's when they were rebranded to show what they're more applicable towards, which was educational programs. I talked to you earlier about your lid, and your levy lid is $2,500 per pupil. That was set in 2018, and it adjusts each year by inflation. So your lid is if you count all your kids in your school buildings, in Running Start, in pre-K, times it by $3,149, that's the most that your voters can pay. So if you ask for a number that's greater than that, the county and OSPI is going to limit you to your lid. So some schools have rollback, and some schools don't go all the way up to their lid. Some people don't, when they do the math, they're going to be below that number. And you've been below that number the last few years. I have some visuals coming up. This slide has the most words on it than any slide I'm about to show you coming up. Another note, there's no validation. Does not matter how many people show up. We would love everybody to turn out, but you just need those that do turn out to have 50% plus one. And you get 2 attempts in the calendar year. So if for any reason there's a hiccup, like we've seen at schools like Marysville or Yelm or Moses Lake, there's 2 attempts per school year, per calendar year for each school district. In our state, on slide 5, I work solely within Washington state school borders in K-12. You'll notice the last few years have been a little challenging. So if this looks at all schools in the state, what the success rate was for educational levies, you'll notice we were around 98% supported until about the time McCleary was passed, when you were deemed fully funded. And then we had a little bit of a tick down, and then the pandemic hit. So we kind of have gotten through this most challenging time, and what you'll notice is a little bit of a recovery in the education world from a perspective of yes voters. And in the current year, we're at 93% supportive. So not back to where we were at 98%, but we're seeing some recovery as we get a little bit of distance from McCleary and from the pandemic. So I think the takeaway from that slide is you've had such great results and we're seeing recovery, but don't take for granted how much work it will take to pass this EP&O levy with all of your supporters. Some people ask what dates are available in Washington state to put a levy on the ballot. And in our state, we have 4 opportunities: February, April, August, and November. One thing I'd love you to do as a board is just cross off August to start, because that's a really challenging month. I think anecdotally, I would say teachers are such an important part of getting the message out about what a levy is used for, and they're on much needed vacations along with administration. But when we look at some of the other options here, February has the highest statistical month of support. But from a preparation perspective, if we asked your CFO what month they prefer, they would prefer it to be known the support of that levy before the budget is adopted in June or July by the board. So one thing you'll notice is most schools run in February. I would say 95% of schools pick that month to go in. And if any reason there's a challenge at that month, there's still 3 other opportunities to run that second attempt. So you may hear criticism from certain voters that say you should only run in November. If you did that, you would probably have a little bit higher turnout, not drastically more unless it's a presidential election, but you'd only have 1 shot at it. So that's why most schools try in February. A couple dates to circle on your calendars. I know Superintendent Nichols has these circled, is if you do choose a February 11th date, which would match how you've historically run your levies, December 13th is the filing deadline to get your resolution in the county's hands. And the date that those ballots will be mailed is approximately January 24th for a certification on the 21st. So I think the biggest two dates to circle will be December 13th. That usually means action at your last November board meeting. And so you have about another month and a half here to prepare what that ballot might look like. And then another date to circle is January 24th, when you might expect to see that ballot in your mailbox. There are questions that we receive quite frequently, and we track data for levies and bonds for the last 20-something years in our database. And we get the question is, what are the results when I run multiple propositions together? For example, there's consideration whether or not now is the time to run a school construction bond. So I'm going to focus on the right hand of these two charts here. If each one of these are run separately, in green, bonds are passed 42.7% of the time. In tan, levies pass 92% of the time. But when those are both run together on the right-hand side of that chart, bonds pass 45.9% of the time. That's not significant. It's a 3% increase in support with a pretty large sample size on both sides. But you'll notice the EP&O levy is unaffected. I think the biggest concern people have is, should we run a bond? Does that jeopardize the district's ability to pass an EP&O levy? Well, you'll notice that the numbers are pretty solid. And in the last almost 9-10 years, we haven't seen a district, knock on wood, struggle with the EP&O levy, but the bonds have been approved at a little bit less than 50% of the time. So I think it's up to, of course, the board knows the community better than anyone, but statistically, there's not a lot of data that shows that they can't be run together. And so some of the thoughts about why. We know the data is there. The whys might be tax fatigue. If you ask for something this February and then the next February, people might say you just asked for a tax measure. And also when you communicate two things together, it's easier to differentiate what they are. Levies are for learning, bonds are for building. We won't be back asking you for taxes for this many more years, right? So that's just anecdotally why we think there might be some more success to putting things together. Now I have some statistics for you. If you're numbers people, this is the size of the Sequim School District tax base. So what you'll notice is just an absolute explosion in your economy here of reassessment of existing homes and new construction. But your tax base is now $8.7 billion with a B, and you've grown this most current year by a 7% clip. I think it looks like you've doubled and then some in the last 7 or 8 years. Now, I'm not sure if that paints the whole picture. So on slide 10, we added a chart that shows how much new development has there been here. And why is new development important? One thing I like to share is if this room is full of about 15 or 20 people, new development is 2 or 3 people sitting down to help us pay the existing taxes. Just because there's new construction or assessment changes doesn't mean the school board has the ability to just raise taxes whenever they prefer. They have to ask voters to approve any kind of increase. So anytime there's more people here, they make each one of our slices of tax pie a little bit smaller unless there's a new measure on the ballot. So one thing that we think about is 500 million in new construction in the last 6 years is a significant amount of new construction. And it's crested almost 100 million in the last 3 years straight. So we may not like it if somebody's moving in from Los Angeles or Seattle, but they're taxpayers nonetheless. They're helping pay some bills. If you're wondering about that total, Tracy, if you go back to slide 10, the previous 6 years before this boom, the total was 200 million. Thank you. On slide 11, this is a visual representation about what the tax rate is for your community. Why are tax rates important? This is how each homeowner can estimate and gets calculated on what their individual tax bill are. We take their property value multiplied by these rates. And so that's why it's such a good way to communicate what this might mean for the average taxpayer. And you'll notice in green is the EP&O tax rate. In the current year, it's 87 cents per thousand. And you'll notice in tan, the capital projects levy today is 43 cents. The last time OSPI posted a report was in 2023, and they ranked your tax rates at 236 out of 295 school districts. So that means there's 235 school districts with tax rates higher than in Sequim. Any questions on tax rates before we move on? On the next slide, this is a visual. So I talk about the property owners. That's who pays the bill. The tax rate is the rate at which it applies to their bill. This is the bill. And in green are all the EP&O levies that have been approved and certified for collection to your taxpayers. You'll notice in tan, there's 1 year left to be collected on what the voters already approved. And you'll see a couple different things that have happened over the years. You've had two methods where one is just flat. You see there's 5 years where it was almost perfectly flat. That's one model that schools do, is they just ask the voters to approve a set amount. But more recently, you'll notice that there's some that just increase a little bit year over year. That's an inflationary model, and that's one of the most common we see across, where districts try and anticipate what inflation might be for their school programs, and they just have a slight increase, and that hopefully results in a level rate. And I have a couple flags here. My first flag in 2024 shows, what is your levy lid? We talked about, we take your student base times a $3,000 number, and that's your levy lid. Today, your lid is $8,081,000. Your current levies that the voters approved is $7.5 million. In other words, you're about $550,000 under levy lid. So one thing that I want to make sure you think about as a board and as a leadership team is the district interested in making sure they can collect their levy lid to support the educational programs and continue on, or are you looking at maximizing those resources? So I put this visual together to show what would it look like if you proposed a levy in the near future that estimated an OSPI levy lid. So that's where you can see there's just a little bit of a shift up for gray, and I have a 4-year levy estimate here, but this is an OSPI model based on your current enrollment. That's what it could look like. Of course, it'll need some additional research from your local team and your ESD, but this is just a visual of, does the district have resources that are necessary to support those programs? Superintendent Nichols, anything to add there?
Well, I think that we've all experienced that we have had great pressures on our budget and having the resources to support several of our programs. So us assessing going from the current 87 cents to 94 cents in order to capture up to our levy lid is a reasonable conversation for us to be having.
Thank you. Tracy, on slide 13, this is a really interesting slide that we put together. I like to call this the community trust slide. In green is what the school board through the leadership team has put on the ballot for the last 10 years-ish. And you'll notice in green, you have not had an amount in gray outperform that. So what I'm saying here is in today's date, 2024, you asked the voters to approve a $1.25 levy. The actual rate today is 87 cents. So you've been very conservative with your estimates. You've asked the voters to support an amount, and the rate is an estimate. And you have done an excellent job of making sure you don't paint too rosy of a picture on the tax rates. You're not understating it, and then here comes the tax bill, and it's higher than what you promised. You've outperformed the tax rate for almost 9-10 straight years. And I also imposed on the same sheet is what would it look like if you moved forward at the OSPI levy lid amount, and you'll notice it's about 30 cents lower than your last ask. So that's the power and the impact of that new construction and that new growth in the economy in your area. So a really good representation of also the team's ability to do great estimates. You have not underestimated your tax rates in the last decade, which is excellent. One last slide before I open it up for any questions is we've been working with the capital facilities group and with your architects and your planners on some tax rate projections. And there's a lot of information that goes into those projections, whether it's your bond rating, what the interest rates are currently, or the structure of those bonds. but I put together just a really high level look at those three models that I believe the facilities team has recently presented to you and what those would look like from a tax rate perspective. So I have the three amounts on the far left. These charts are all the same up to year 25, but there's an amount in blue that shows what would the tax rate be for each one of those projects. So I think these have already been put to you in different degrees or different visuals, but I wanted to make sure I put them at the end of this presentation so you can see that things don't operate in a silo. The EP&O levy needs to be renewed, but you should also be keeping in mind the back of your mind about what's going to happen with the bond rate. So this one brings it all together into a comprehensive view of what would it look like for your EP&O and your bond rate should you pick one of these three options to proceed with.
What I would like to point out on this slide is back in 2020. Back in 2020, we were at a rate of $1.96. And of all of our three options that we've put forth in the community, none of them reached that level of 2020.
Happy to answer any questions. Thanks for the time on the agenda. Best of luck in your decision on what to put forth to the voters for your EP&O replacement levy. We stand at the ready to answer any future questions.
Tell me a little bit more about the inflationary model versus the one steady price model.
Yeah, you'll notice that, Tracy, if we go back to slide 12. So what we notice across the state as we work with school districts, we see two basic models, and sometimes it comes down to how do you want to communicate to taxpayers? So for example, if your levy is 5.7 million for 4 years, voters vote yes. But if you ask for the same amount for 4 straight years, but your community has 100 million in new construction each year and homes are reassessed, then that rate's going to come down. So the question is, what is the best way to communicate with taxpayers how this will work? Some people like to have an amount that varies each year and grows, and they take into consideration that new economy, and so the tax rate's level. So that's the model I have here is the tax rate would be 94 cents for those years in gray, but you see the amount increases each year. The reverse of that would be is you can pick a model that's, let's say, 8.8 million and leave it flat for 4 years, but then your tax rate would be 94 cents, 92 cents, 90 cents, 88 cents. And there's no wrong way to do it. The best question is, what does the district need to support its educational infrastructure? And so the inflationary model is kind of taken over because in the old days, inflation could have been 1% each year, and the cost of goods wasn't skyrocketing maybe 15 years ago. But now we're seeing 3% is almost the floor recently.
And I'm kind of assuming all the things we described from a program perspective that it essentially pays for, and so you'd almost be projecting in that case if you didn't have some modest percentage, I mean, it almost would create a budget shortfall, assuming, yeah, like if there's 3% or even 1% would somehow create a budget shortfall because you can't collect anything more than what's voter approved, correct?
Correct. And you look at also customarily salary and bargaining units have built-in cost of living adjustments, whether it's even for coaches or paraprofessionals or certs that might not be funded by basic education that are maybe above and beyond the formulas. So correct, anytime it's flat, then you might be in a position where cuts are made each year to keep doing what you're doing, versus this gives you a little bit of extra flexibility to keep up with those costs of living for staff and their associated benefits.
Okay. The other question I had regarding the lid, I think there were two different scenarios, and I think the one that was bolded was that because that's the letter that's essentially what we meet is that threshold.
Correct. On slide 4, I kind of went right over it, but in our state we have a formula, and it's the lesser of $2.50 times your $8 billion tax base, or this $3,000 per student. It's really sad to think that in our state, they calculate two numbers and you get the smaller of the two. That means there's some inequities across our state from different schools, depending on, some don't have an $8 billion tax base. Some small schools don't have that. So they might have 50 kids and they can only collect a small levy. So correct, if we did the math and took $2.50 times 8 billion, we'd be way up here. And the state says you get the smaller of the two. So I don't like it when we have a formula like this, but here we are. McCleary has fixed some things, but it's created some other challenges elsewhere.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Other questions?
And that's per year, right? That's not over the 4 years.
Correct.
Okay.
And so that's the hard part, is seeing the future.
Mhm.
What will enrollment be in that third or fourth year? Can you build a little bit of cushion each year?
Mhm.
But the current numbers in this presentation are using OSPI's estimates on inflation, what that 3,000 number changes by each year, and your enrollment. So the leadership team will, of course, analyze those to see if any adjustments are necessary and adjust those amounts in gray on those other slides. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything to add?
So we will be coming back to you from the business office with discussions about how our levy is currently funding different activities and enrichment and programming in the school district. And then the next layer after that will be for us to come back with a recommendation. So the next time we talk, it will be really important that we are discussing the priorities that our levy is furthering and making sure that we're coming back to have the priorities covered through the levy recommendation that you would all want.
Great. Thank you. Next, I think we have our facilities report.
So good afternoon to the board. Good afternoon to the superintendent and Tracy. This is our latest capital projects and other projects update to you. Next slide, please. So if you'll notice on this next slide, all the orange lettering. Those were all the projects that were in progress last time I spoke to you back in June. Next slide, please. Almost all of those orange items you saw on that previous slide are not complete, with the exception of the high school, and I will elaborate on its completeness in the next slide. Our capital projects that we've completed since I spoke to you last: OPA's HVAC is done, the BMS controls it is done, the flat roof work on OPA, and the fire upgrades we had to do to that facility due to the fact that once we unhooked the old duct detectors and the old beam detectors, they didn't want to come back online again. So we had some devices we had to replace. Helen Holler and the middle school both got new fire alarm systems, new main panels, new devices throughout the school. We downscaled the Helen Holler sewer job. And the reason being is really what we needed was access to the pump and the system and the tank and the gear that was inside the vault itself. That was our problem, is that previously the way that it had been built was an illegal confined space. We just couldn't get in there. So we had $200 some odd thousand in the job. We have a design now to replace the whole ball of wax, but we thought it was just a bridge too far, actually, from a dollar perspective, to replace all of it, when my maintenance personnel were confident that if they could just get into the vault and work on the two pumps that are in there and the tank, that we could make it reliable. And they did, and we have. So on we go with preventive maintenance on the vault without having to spend a bunch of money. High school ABC and E flat roof insulation replacements were complete. We all know the high school track was resurfaced, along with the pole vault safety reconfiguration that we'll see in a moment in a picture, and of course the lights. Important to note about the lights is that the lights that we've installed are LED, and they will consume 1/3 the amount of energy the metal halide units consumed in the past. We're still working with Clallam County to see what kind of a rebate that's going to be, but it'll be money to talk about. On that same note, I should mention that we're looking at about 32,000 to 35,000 in rebates from the county on the high school HVAC work. Helen Holler and the middle school's intercom replacements were also complete. That's Bo and his crew. And of course, the district office, boardroom, business office, and parking lot ADA access improvements. And in case all of us don't know what those are, it's not only just the ADA access improvements here in front of the district office. It's also ADA access improvements and parking spaces and reconfiguration that is over here in the South High School parking lot. All right. District projects complete. So these are non-levy projects. We established playground installation locations at Holler and at Gray Wolf, and it's an important note because when I came on board, the equipment, or the toys, I'll call them, were ordered, but they didn't have a home. So we had to figure out how we were going to get those installed in existing playgrounds without having to create a quarter acre at each site for new toys. So I'll show you here in a moment the almost 250 cubic yards of certified wood chips that we had, my crew, our maintenance crews had to move in order to establish these playgrounds for these toys. The installation of the playground equipment, of course, was done by a third party at both Holler and Gray Wolf. Auto shot fence replacement and gravel infill. I believe I'd mentioned that in the past, but it's now complete with the gravel infill under the fence. So you can't crawl into the fence. Donated office furniture deliveries and disposals. So there were various chairs, tables, conference tables, and other very useful items that we were happy to have donated to us. Of course, that has a converse effect where all the old stuff's got to go. So it took us a couple of months to haul that stuff to PA, but it's complete now. Multiple summer classroom and administrative moves. That's outside of the donated furniture. That's moving classrooms to Gray Wolf and corresponding classrooms back to Helen Holler, and some other administrative moves here around the building. Varsity baseball score booth construction. This was something that we offered, the facility group offered to do for the varsity group in lieu of it being built in a different fashion. I'll just put it that way. So at any rate, it's a code compliant building, temporary building, less than 200 square feet. We'll show it to you here in a moment. And the varsity baseball group is quite happy. So hats off to the maintenance group that constructed the group, or constructed the booth. Irrigation water, the pump house sprinkler line to Helen Holler. It's actually two things. We had to establish the pump house with a pump, with a controller, with the voltage, with a heater, and all the other code compliant items that had to go in the pump house in order for us to utilize the free irrigation water that flows up and down Fur. It might surprise you to know that the school here has been irrigating this property, not Holler, but this property, with city water for many years. So finally, the pump house is complete. And as a bonus, we connected the back side of the middle school's sprinkler system to the existing sprinkler system at Holler that had been severed many years ago, backside of the property. So I think I heard not long ago from one of our principals that the north side of Helen Holler's grass is actually green. It's frankly, it's many weeds, but it's green, and it's not a muddy mess anymore. And of course, thanks to one of our local benefactors, the Gray Wolf fence was also completed. Capital projects in progress is high school HVAC. We'll get into that in a second. And the gym door replacements and ADA improvements. This is a continuation of the gym floor replacement. It's the project that keeps on going. So the doors are in. We're still working on the thresholds with the contractor and some anchors that have to be put in the floor so we can get the locks correct. Otherwise, it's safe. It locks. It's currently under TCO. So still moving on it. And then finally on the horizon is our CTE building. So we do have the grant letter. There's some other coordination that's going on in the background, and we're about to kick that in high gear. Next slide, please. So the high school, HVAC, huge project, 3 point something million. Started the day after school let out. We picked our first heat pump off the gym the day after school let out. This is what's been completed in that period of time until yesterday, Saturday, when we installed 4 HVAC units. We call them BARD units. BARD is the brand. BARD units on the portables. We did it over the weekend, so 4 more of those are done. Anyway, 32 rooftop units, and predominantly those are classrooms and gym. 24 indoor air handlers with electric heat. That's H building. 18 exhaust hoods, 12 duct heating assemblies, 38 exhaust fans, 7 mezzanine heaters, 4 class 1 exhaust hoods with fire protection. That's an important note because repeatedly over the last 3 to 5 years, our wonderful partners at District 3 Fire have noted that in order to have ovens and stoves in a home ec room or in a culinary room, you have to have class 1 hoods. Otherwise, they can't stay. So finally, we got the class 1 hoods in. They also have new stoves and new ovens, and Ms. Dahl is quite happy. 4 HVAC units installed at Gray Wolf. I think I mentioned that a moment ago. 3 HVAC units at OPA portables. Those were the units that had been bought back in 1922 and been stored outside here. So we finally utilized those. And the building management system controls. We are hooked up now, and the heat is on at the high school. Right, Eric? Okay. All right. In progress. The 5 heat recovery units, you see, those are the big blue boxes that are still sitting in the cage over there. 2 of those go on the gym, on each locker room, and 3 of them go on building E. Building E is not really an issue for us right now. 2.5 of those work. And then both the units on the locker rooms still work. It's now a matter of threading the needle when we're not using the gym, we don't have tournaments going on, or we don't have people traversing the CTE buildings and the shops and so on. So we're getting that schedule squared away. It won't be long. It'll be 30, 45 days. Those will be on the roof. 4 HVAC units for the high school portables. The first 2 will go on this week. And then the other 2 will probably do over a weekend, probably a week from Saturday. Testing and balancing is occurring at night, and the commissioning of the completed buildings, not per unit, but per building, is also happening at night. Next slide, please. So some pictures for you. Left side pictures, obviously the cranes, that's the HVAC work going on at the high school. There's the class 1 hood in the culinary teaching room. An example of one of the new panels there, fire panels, that's Helen Holler. And then, of course, the track with the lights on and so on, which is that's a picture of the track when it got resurfaced. And then the new lights. But if you look in the foreground, you can see how the pole vault was pushed to the north a bit to get it away from the wall. And if you recall me telling you about that, they're so close to the wall that they had to pile pads on it and so on. There was a hazard, basically. The kids missed the pole vault and went too far right. They could hit the wall. So that reconfiguration helped with our safety efforts there. Bottom middle is the new playground equipment at Holler. Bottom right are the new toys at Gray Wolf, along with the new chips installed. Above that is the 5 dump truck loads of engineered certified wood chips that my crew spread on the playgrounds. And then finally, the scorer's booth and the announcement booth for the varsity baseball field. Next slide, please. So I received some correspondence not long ago from a member of our community that was concerned about the vehicle restrictions we were imposing across the service road that goes, as the plan view picture there would tell you, by that red circle. So you see two red circles there, one to the north, one to the south. The one to the south is the barrier that the individual was referencing. We have a chain across it with a padlock, and we padlock it and we restrict that access after 3:30 to 4 o'clock every day. To be honest, there was always a gate there. When I was hired, the gate that was there was a fence type gate. It was derelict, quite dangerous. In fact, I had it removed. And I said, all right, let's see if our constituents will be cool and not drive through there, park in there, or, you know, let's see what happens. Well, we did. And within a couple of months, we caught a couple of folks that would go all the way around to the right where the orange line is. I'm sorry, that's awfully faint, but where the orange line is, and their vehicles can reach the interior of the high school on that service road. And they were doing that. We also had some individuals that were caught driving around on baseball fields. So when the track resurfacing was complete, I reinstituted that vehicle barrier to the south. The pink square that Tracy is pointing at is an open fence line. So the track itself, the stadium, if you will, isn't secure either. There's no full fence that goes all the way to the north. So if you went up that service road and hung a left, you could get into the stadium and do quite a bit of damage. The other red circle to the north is a personnel gate. It is the gate that the middle school uses to come through when they're utilizing the stadium during the day, during school day. The yellow circle is the access for our physically challenged guests. So it's wide enough for wheelchairs and walkers and so on and so forth. And that is the common entrance for those individuals. The blue diamonds that you see are asphalt, paved asphalt areas that are of a slope that would comply with ADA if we meant them to be so. But I want to be clear, the stadium itself is not ADA compliant. And the reason why it isn't is because it was grandfathered in. And we have yet to perform the construction on that site that would drive that code upgrade, if that makes sense. Okay. So the individual that had contacted me was concerned that there was nowhere for pedestrians to traverse near that south side red circle. The individual suggested to us that we install a split in the gate, such as you see there on the right. That is actually the picture that this individual provided me in the email. And if you look at the plan view on the right of the south red circle, little green circle. Next slide, please. So there is access past the vehicle barrier on the right. As you can see, pedestrian access, if you will. So there is a break in the fence, been there for a very long time. And obviously it's pretty well used based on the condition of the grass that's right there. So I'm not sure if the individual didn't realize that there was a pass-through area or not. However, I felt that if that individual missed it, maybe others are. So what we did is we had a couple signs made up for pedestrian access, those yellow signs you see with the arrow that point to the right, and we improved our wayfinding. So that's really the long and short of why that vehicle barrier is there. It's to protect, number one, our facilities. Number two, it is there to restrict access because those are service roads for my groundskeepers and my maintenance personnel during the day. That's really what it's for. If the coaches need to get back there to offload a bunch of stuff, we allow that, and then we'll close it up behind them and they'll find their way back out to the parking lot. But that's why it's there. And I thought it would be nice to bring it up in front of the board and here in public forum to explain to folks that's why that chain is there. And you have the pedestrian access here, which, by the way, is not stadium access, if you will. That's actually the baseball field access, if you will. The stadium access is that yellow circle on the other side. But nevertheless, we thought it would be beneficial to clearly mark it. So we've done so.
That was going to be my question. Is the only spot where you need the pedestrian access on that side anyway is for the baseball fields?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay.
Don't get me wrong, we still have our community soccer clubs and other folks that use the grass portion of the stadium and or the track, quite frankly. We'll park in the stadium parking and then walk around to this right area. And then there's another, you can't see it, it's by the first light pole in the picture. There's another access gate right there that is actually a vehicle access gate for the stadium grounds themselves.
Mhm.
We leave that open during games so people can go to and from there if they like. Any questions about presentation or?
When you followed up with the
Thanks.
person who sent that to you, did that satisfy their concerns?
I have not followed up with them yet
Mhm.
directly.
Mhm.
I felt it more beneficial to explain to the board why we have restricted vehicle access across this area, and I will follow up with that individual now that I've spoken to you.
Good.
Yes.
Thanks.
Well, I do appreciate the problem solving on all of this as well. So thank you.
Yes, of
And the
course.
signage.
Thank you.
I do have a question. Are there, because I'm looking at the access
Mhm.
that we're talking about, it does look, fair, like you said, worn and rough, from years of being used.
Mhm.
Is there any plans to make it a little more robust so it's not going down a slope? And, like I said, if someone's in a wheelchair or has mobility issues, I can see that still. I'm ready for the next issue that pops up because of the access there. Is there any way to make that, or any plans?
There's not currently,
Okay,
to
alright.
be honest. It's something we didn't budget
Right.
for. it- Director Roca, the trouble we wind up with there is if we pave that area or we start down that path, we will have to make it ADA compliant.
Gotcha.
And that will,
Yeah.
there's some significant cost involved in that.
Right.
But we can think about how we might make a personnel gate closer to the edge of the driveway. To have to measure it to make sure that our heavy equipment can get through there and not clip it at the same time. But for now, that's what we have, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. All right. All right. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Going to bring us to the superintendent.
Thank you very much. So I would like you to know that October is a month where we do recognize many different initiatives, efforts, and employees. And I just want to let you know some of those dates this month so that you are aware. October is Resiliency Month, and it is also the month of recognizing principals. So I would like to put those two together and say principals are some of the most resilient people you'll ever meet, right? And so a shout out to our principal team. They work so hard each and every day. They are constantly thinking about how we can just tweak and tune what we're doing so we're maximizing what our students are getting. They are very dedicated to communication, and they are the ambassadors for folks who don't typically come to our schools. So when parents are coming in to talk about something, when visitors come along, reaching out to people who might come and do something enriching for our school. There's a lot to that job, as you know, and we're very fortunate to have the team we do. So my shout out to our principals. I'd like to also let you know that back on October 2nd, it was School Custodian Appreciation Day. And our school custodial teams, as you know, Mike just reviewed a lot of work that's been going on, and they certainly have their regular jobs of just taking care of the routines. But throughout the summer, we had them working so much with different capital project initiatives, and whatever is done in their building becomes their responsibility so often. So thank you to them. The 14th of October will be Indigenous Peoples Day. On the 16th of October, it's Unity Day, which is really known around a Stop the Bullying effort. And so we will be recognizing that, and we have anti-bullying as, of course, a priority in our district. We want all students to feel they belong and are safe. Coming up on the 21st through the 25th is National School Bus Safety Week. And I had the pleasure this morning of speaking directly to our driver team and acknowledging this and thanking them for their service. And just on Friday, there was a terrible accident out by the casino, and our school bus drivers were on their way out to areas and had students on their bus stopped in traffic. You can't just turn a school bus around. Think how hard it is to turn your own vehicle around in a situation like that. The drivers did an amazing job managing the students and calling in to dispatch. I was able to watch dispatch handle that situation beautifully, and we used our new smart tag texting system to reach out to the parents of the students on the buses that were affected. So a shout out to everything they do, and safety, of course, is first and foremost. And then to let you know, at the end of this month, on the 30th and 31st, we have parent-teacher conferences. And I would just like to express to everyone listening that we hope that you are registering for those. Those schedules are out and available in our schools, online scheduling. Be sure that you are taking a peek and seeing when you can be in attendance for that important priority that we make. Tonight, we do have one of our principals with us, Erin Fox, and I would like to give her the floor during my report because we are doing something so exciting at Sequim High School, and I'd like her to share it with you. Erin?
You. We were just awarded a $10,000 grant from OSPI for the 9th grade success team. This is a program that's been going on for a few years. It's run by the College Success Foundation. And with that, we get a coach. His name's Doug. He's fantastic. We've already done training with him and have a whole team of 9th grade teachers. What the goal is to increase our 9th grade on track data. So that's something that OSPI tracks for schools in the state of Washington. And why they do that is because it is the #1 predictor of whether or not students will graduate from high school. 9th grade on track is more predictive than socioeconomic status, race, kind of anything you can think of. On trackness is actually the #1 predictor. If kids end their 9th grade year on track, they're 3 times more likely than those not on track to graduate from high school. So it's a huge predictive quality that we look at. And what we'll be doing is just looking at data throughout the school year with the teacher group and putting together some initiatives to help 9th grade students. Some things on the table already are around organizational skills. This morning I was meeting with some teachers and they talked about the state of backpacks and finding just, the crumpled bits of paper and things like that. That, make it so kids aren't necessarily turning in assignments. We've also just started our extending learning at the high school. So adding an hour a week for kids to work on those essential standards and make sure that they're making progress in their classes. So really focusing there, and we are just so excited. A huge thank you to the Port Angeles School District. They've been working with the 9th grade success grant. This is their 2nd year, and they're the ones who recommended us as a partner in that. So I'm just really thankful that that happened and that we're able to bring this initiative to Sequim High School. I think it's going to make a huge difference.
Thank you. Any questions for Erin?
That's great.
Great.
Sounds great.
Well, I'd like to thank Erin and her team for being so open and really excited about what the possibilities can be when you do bring new programming along this way. And the extended learning that the high school and our middle school is doing, along with tutorials at our elementary schools, is an outcropping of our PLC Institute and work. So it's wonderful to be able to have people go get training, but it's another level when you bring it back and make the application. So kudos to our teams for doing that part. I want to give a long-range facilities planning group info session update to you. I think at this point now, we've completed 6 presentations. Just did one this morning with school bus drivers at 6:30 a.m. We absolutely are trying to reach out to all possible groups. One of the groups that we hadn't necessarily signed on for this long-range facilities reason, but we plan to be at it, was the safety fair for Clallam County on Saturday. And in making that commitment, we were able to talk with so many folks who don't necessarily have children in our schools and be able to let them know we do want your input. We do care what you think about what our direction is in this regard. Please take the survey that will be coming out. And that survey right now is in its last iteration of getting approvals, and we should have that out tomorrow to our community. I'd like to let you know that school visits will continue. We'll be out at Helen Haller tomorrow evening for a public forum. We will be at Sequim High School a week from Tuesday. And so we're hoping that we can get a number of folks out to hear what we have to share about the recommendations, but also see the buildings, because seeing is believing, and getting questions answered is so important. I'd like to let you know on a different note, Policy Committee has convened this year, and we absolutely are looking at discipline. The state has come out with renewed extensions for how we should be looking at discipline RCWs. And so we are doing a deep dive into that and making sure that we are bringing you any updates that are necessary. So our policy committee will be hard at work on that. And would like to let you know that I was able to tour the Northwater Academy that is over in North Kitsap. It is a school that is designed to focus on behavioral intervention and helping students be successful in learning the skills necessary to have success in class. And I did go tour that building, and I will say it's quite an interesting program, and people are inspired to bring a lot of success to students who just have some things to learn. And the students at the school right now are being incredibly successful. So that's great news. We have a Habitat for Humanity breakfast that was attended this morning, and that was quite an inspiring group to be among. It was held in Port Angeles, and it's exciting to know that workforce development is a goal for so many organizations. And how might Habitat relate to that? Well, housing is needed for people who are in service jobs or in professional jobs. And I see the nexus with our efforts around facilities. If we can have our facilities be of a grade where people feel it's bringing confidence, 21st century modernization, I think we too will support this effort to build our peninsula and make sure our workforce is solid and we are attracting folks to do so. And then I would share that we have our 5th grade that's going to be heading out again to outdoor education out at Lake Crescent. That's going to happen later this month. And we already had our OPA students head out to Ramblewood. So outdoor education for the fall is alive and well, and we'll be giving you more information about that. One place you can look for information is in Kaleidoscope Magazine. Our next issue will be out, we think, on Friday. Okay. All right.
Any questions? Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right. That's gonna bring us to our board business. We're gonna start with 9.01, approval of top 10 legislative priorities. And you will see that thank you, Director Jeffries, for collecting all the information. And one thing that I'll note on here, and these haven't been the first 6 items. Pretty much, I know that at least 3 are based on responses from board members. At least 3 or more board members did agree with that. However, recently I just did add, I did see Pat's priorities, and so now based on that, we could also add transition to kindergarten and support for special education programs as ones that I think we have consensus. It's the title of the WASDA priority is support for special education programs, but within that is that fully fund special education and no artificial cap, which is, so I think that's one that we've all talked about being on the same page. So that gives us, that would give us 8 items essentially. So there's 2 items left, but we have some other suggestions that were brought up that we need to discuss if we want to use to narrow that down to 2 to fill the last 2 spots. So let the contentious debate begin. No, I'm just Larry.
No, I would just say, I'm not absolutely, I'm not sure. There's no mandate that we have to have 10. There are probably 30 we could all, say are important, but the one that's kind of new is the insurance premiums, which is a concern around the state with insurance premiums massively increasing everywhere. Is there some help legislation that would help support those increases? Is on the list, and keep in mind, these are advocacy. I wanted to say lobbying, but that's a bad word, in some circles. But essentially the positions that WASDA would support. And if legislation comes up, they look at it and does this comply or support what the WASDA Board of Directors around the state thinks is important, and then they would advocate for it. And and this is not in any rank order. So we may want to sit down as a board later on and decide, what are our top 3 or 5 or whatever that we're going to talk to our legislators about, or others. This is what's important to Sequim. And so it, I will say WASDA has gone a long way to make the whole process a lot less cumbersome and more transparent and easier to navigate. So that was good. In fact, we finished the General Assembly, which normally takes a day and a half or 2 days, and we finished all in 1 day. I don't know about I participated. I just kind of went along with the flow and said, yeah, 1 day's good. We did a great job. Let's go home. Although I was at home, it was all virtual. So for me.
One thing I'll share that and this is just me speaking individually, but I would definitely, if there are 2 extra spots that were agreeable to the first 8, I would definitely see the importance of having the equitable funding for regionalization and staff mix as being included on there. And I also know that I believe we at least had 2 board directors that mentioned something about literacy being an aspect. And I believe that was also one where I noticed the title, one I think said literacy programs, but I couldn't find literacy programs, but there was the title that marked literacy. So I wanted to make sure that that was the one that we were for legislative positions.
Yeah, I think the one that I marked was, I saw there were actually 2 that referenced literacy, but the one that I thought was worthwhile was focused on funding for students who sort of, I don't know if we use the word remedial, but who are already within the system and who didn't learn what they needed to learn in the early grades and still need that kind of support so that they're not just passed along. And so it was all about retrenching with our students after those early grades to make sure they have the literacy that they need in order to be successful in middle school and high school. So I think that was the one that I was looking at.
Okay. I want to just make sure then. I don't believe that I saw, was it a because there's the legislative positions and there's also the permanent
It
positions.
was a legislative
Okay.
position, I think.
Okay. So I want to make sure.
Yeah,
What-
they were in
what-
2 different categories.
Yeah, so there's literacy and then there's a literacy permanent. One is under funding and allocations, one under governance. The one that's the permanent position is WASDA believes that literacy is the foundational to all learning and central support every student, informed decision making, civic participation, adopt policies that support evidence. I'm summarizing to some degree. Evidence-based literacy acquisition that improves all students' literacy rates and eliminates disparities in literacy across all grades. And then the legislative one is, can you click on the one that just says literacy? Bring it up. That one is actually much shorter, so it doesn't sound like it's the one that you were referring
Now,
to.
the one that I was referring to actually had a discussion about changing models of teaching literacy and how we are evolving into a new approach to teaching literacy, but those students who, and that older students who could benefit from that approach need to be supported.
Mhm.
So it was more about pedagogical techniques.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look. And I don't know if I was the only one who supported that, but
No, I included that one as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just not.
I'm just not happy.
So yeah, these are the, when you type in the word, this is exactly what I did, what Tracy did here. I just typed in the word literacy, and these are the two that I saw. This one being a 2024 position. But definitely was, so I wasn't able to find. I guess. the one.
3.22 in the handbook, that's, but I haven't had a
It seems like
chance to
that-
really look at.
Yeah. and
That pretty
was-
much supports what Maren was talking
Yeah.
about. I mean, the idea of evidence-based literacy acquisition across all
Yeah.
grades. So that's what you're talking about is essentially, and screening. So the idea that, you're screening kids, make sure that they have the the literacy skills that they need and that they're
Right.
at grade level. And if they're not at grade level, then what can you, I think that was probably both of what our
Okay.
intention was
Right.
just to make that, just to elevate that as a priority.
Right. It was 22, the one that I noticed.
What was what?
22 was the number of the, but I just don't know which category it was.
Oh,
in.
I see, yeah.
But it sounds like we were in agreement as to which one we.
Okay. So with that, I think, well, I'm wondering if there's consensus around. Or if we could talk about some of the others that were mentioned, certainly, but I wouldn't be opposed to adding the literacy one as one of our top 10. And also the one that's around equitable regionalization and staff mix, which I think
I
are,
would agree with that.
Yeah.
It looks to me like the literacy one is in funding and allocations. That's where it comes from.
It's a problem when they have two things named the same
Mhm.
thing.
imagine
It's
that.
like- Yeah.
On about page 77 of the handbook, so, but that's the one you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like I said, there are several that we could add to the list that we, it's kind
Oh,
of
of
like
course.
mom apple pie and ice cream and cherry pie and brownies, and because they're all so important. And I don't know what, it's a long legislative session and there's gonna be lots and lots of stuff. So look for calls to action from WASDA saying we need somebody to speak for or against this, either by email or show up down in Olympia and or online and express your thoughts. And once we find out who our three reps are, we may want to start sending out invitations, come to see us, or we'll come to see you and talk about our specific needs. So they're aware of our needs.
So, why don't we attempt a motion here, just so we're all on the same page, but, I can go ahead and, but I'll move that we submit the top 10 WASDA legislative priorities using the following, and I'll list it by title amply funded staffing levels, full funding of basic education, MSOC funding, transportation funding, insurance premiums, funding safe, healthy, contemporary school buildings, transition to kindergarten, support for special education programs, equitable funding for regionalization and staff mix, and literacy.
And I don't know on the, go ahead.
Well,
I second.
Hope, there you go.
And I don't know, and if on the form, there'll be a way to clarify the literacy one, because like I said, there are two of them. And probably you will need, usually the president of the board will need to submit these by 11:59 PM, midnight tomorrow.
There are two of them, however, only one is a legislative position,
Right.
and we are only ranking legislative positions.
Right.
So the other is a permanent
Permanent.
position, which we are
Right.
not ranking. So that should clear it up.
And we're not really ranking, we're just, these are our 10.
Yeah, the 10 are not in any particular order. So that
Mhm.
saves us having to, you know,
That would, yeah,
Yeah.
we'd
That
be
might
here all
fit.
night.
yes.
Mhm.
So, any further discussion on those being our top 10? All right. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
I,
Aye. All right, motion passes. And yeah, I think we could definitely, we can look as it relates to Sequim School District legislative priorities,
Mhm.
potentially a much more narrower path and see what might have also, well, I need to consider what has the most likelihood of being effective,
Mhm.
so far as actually getting passed in the legislation, right? All right. Second reading and approval of policy 6702 wellness. We have a motion.
I move that we approve policy 6702 wellness.
I second.
All right, any discussion? All right, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes. And I believe that concludes our business. So with that,
For the good of the order, we got something
ahead.
tomorrow night, correct?
Tomorrow
And
night?
next week, right?
We do. Well, we have the following. Let me just pull my schedule.
Helen Howler tomorrow at 5, right?
Helen Haller is tomorrow at 5 o'clock. You will have the high school has a public forum next week on Tuesday, the 15th, also at 5 o'clock. We have various community groups that we'll be engaging with. And I would really say to you, if you have any group that you may be affiliated with or somebody you know is affiliated with, we'd like to evaluate if that is a group that we should be scheduling for a visit. So I'd love to hear from you around that.
And what's the topic of the forum?
The topic of the forum is long-range facilities planning group, making sure that people know the recommendations for the future of our facilities and a potential bond resolution.
okay. All right. With that, we will be adjourned.